Why can't I drink water in my hot yoga class? Sounds almost like an oxymoron. Is this a joke? Can I really not drink water? Have you ever been to a hot yoga Bikram class and after the eagle pose, the teacher yells out, "Party time"? Now for a first timer, they might think, what are they talking about? And then they look around and they see people picking up their water bottles and drinking water. They figured, okay, I guess it's time to drink water, even though it doesn't really seem like a party to me in the first place.
This is a party?
This is the actual official designated water break in a Bikram class. Now in some Bikram classes, if somebody picks up a bottle of water before the designated party time water break, they may be reprimanded by the teacher, or the teacher may say something to them. And that's exactly what happened in Bikram NYC, now it's Bodhi NYC Yoga Studio at the end of January 2025. Now, the person that took the drink of water when they weren't supposed to was a TikTok influencer. The teacher reprimanded her. She went out of the class in outrage, posted a video about her outrage, and the video went viral. At the end of March, the New York Times did an article about the whole situation. Later on, the teacher denied reprimanding her, said she asked nicely. But let's talk about why this rule is even in place and give you my 40-year history behind the whole concept of party time and the water break and the designated water break, and why there even is such a thing. Because you would think in a hot room, 105, which is 40.56 centigrade, just looked it up on Siri. It's a hot room, so you'd think you'd want to be able to hydrate as much as you possibly can. So back in my day, when we walked 10 miles in the snow to our Beverly Hills yoga class, they didn't even have water bottles. They weren't even invented yet. I think Evian started the whole thing in the mid-'80s. Back then, Bikram had a big 5-gallon water jug in the hallway. So after the standing poses, we would all go outside and get our paper cone cups and drink as much water as we could and go back into the class. We didn't drink water during the class because technology hadn't invented a way of doing it yet. Now let's go back even further to Bikram's teacher, Bikram's guru, Vishnu Ghosh, the innovator and the developer of this style of hot yoga, which I now nickname hot yoga. Some people call it Ghosh yoga. Other people refer to it as Bikram yoga. I call it Barkan yoga. These are still expressions of Vishnu Ghosh's creation. He was the founder. He was the groundbreaker that created alignment concepts to get people to do yoga in a very intense way. Now, Vishnu Ghosh was a disciplinarian. He ran a tight ship.
I am Gunnery Sergeant Hartman, your senior drill instructor.
Bikram would tell stories that he'd have a stick behind his chair. And if somebody complained that their leg was hurting them and they couldn't do this pose, he'd reach back, grab his stick, the students would back away. He'd smack them on the other leg and say, "Here, now you're even. Now you can do the pose." It was a very disciplined, tight ship. And it's not just Vishnu Ghosh. Other styles of yoga are also, because it comes from Asia. India is in Asia, and it comes from Asia, which is a very discipline-oriented society. A very prominent teacher from another style of yoga was extremely tough and disciplinary. I was told that he would make somebody cry in every class that he taught. And his daughter, who took over the studio, was even tougher than he was. Padabi Joyce, the founder of Ashtanga Yoga, same thing, a disciplinarian. A lot of people have this idea that yoga teachers are wonderful and kind and loving, and they are. I mean, their intention is. But at the same time, traditional, at least traditional in this modern day time, the yoga teachers are extremely tough. Even Paramahansa Yogananda, who is Vishnu Ghosh's older brother, by the way, his guru, Swami Sri Yukteswar, is also a disciplinarian. There was another famous yoga teacher named Vishnu Devananda from the tradition of Shivananda Yoga. He writes in his book, he wrote a very famous book called The Complete Illustrated Book of Yoga, back I think in the 60s, and he said that the yoga class is a dictatorship. Now back to Bikram. When he first came to this country, actually he first came from Japan to Hawaii, then San Francisco, and eventually ended up in Beverly Hills. And he was also very strict when he first came to this country. But slowly he began to adapt to the culture because we're not from the East. We're not an Asian society. In Asia, the concept is the more discipline you have in your life, the more peace of mind you experience. In the West, not just America, but Canada, Europe, Australia, it's how much leisure time we can find in our daily life to determine our peace of mind. So it's a different culture. So Bikram ended up Americanizing the discipline, Americanizing his approach, and he wasn't as disciplined as he was when he first came to this country. So the point is the history of yoga, tradition, at least in modern day times, a tradition from India is a very strict discipline. As it migrated to the West, we became a little more lax in enforcing the discipline. And as yoga teachers, we need to find that sweet spot in the middle. We still want to have a structure. Everyone's doing the same thing at the same time, but at the same time, we still have to be discerning on when we need to be lenient, when we need to allow someone to drink a glass of water if they're absolutely overheated, or not necessarily reprimand. I'm not saying the teacher reprimanded that person at Bodhi NYC. She actually, like I said, later claimed that she asked nicely. Many times I'll diffuse the situation by not being a tough disciplinarian. We might be on a quick water break, and some people may be talking with each other. Now it's time to start, and they're still talking. Instead of saying, stop it, no talking, keep your mouth shut, I'll say, in a joking way, feel free to talk amongst yourselves. I diffuse the situation. People laugh, especially the people that were talking, and guess what? They stopped talking. I diffused the situation. Didn't have to be this mean drill sergeant disciplinarian, and now no one's talking anymore. Now, Bikram demanded that discipline from his teachers or his teachers in training. Doing Bikram's teacher training program in 1981, there was only 3 of us. So we always held the posture for as long as Bikram would say to hold it. He'd go out and make a phone call, come back, you better still be holding the pose. So we were extremely disciplined by our own choosing, and it really wasn't enforced to the rest of the class. Interesting story about Bikram's brother, Buddha, who taught us a class. I think this was 1982. He was visiting his brother in Beverly Hills, and he taught a class, and he taught it more in the traditional, very strict Vishnu Ghosh form. We had to stand at attention between each pose. We couldn't pick up our towel to dry ourselves off. There was no water bottles invented yet, so forget about drinking water. It was a very structured, disciplined class, and he kicked our butts. And we were doing 3-4 classes a day at the time. He still kicked our butt just on the enforcement of the discipline, making that his focus. As Bikram's teacher training programs began to grow, because he started his first condensed training in 1994, he slowly, by the year 2000, 2002, he was getting 200, 250, 300 people in a training. So he no longer could combine his teacher training program with his mainstream class. There was too many people. So he ended up getting another facility on La Cienega Boulevard outside of Beverly Hills, this massive facility, and that's where he did his teacher training programs. And this, when this transition happened, I believe is where the whole discipline thing started to take place. Because if some of you know, some of the Bikram teachers are very disciplinarian, very drill sergeant-like. And let me explain to you why that happened then, not in the beginning. Bikram's focus wasn't on enforcing discipline. His focus and intention was getting you or your students to do the best possible yoga you can. And that's what I was raised on. Not so we would enforce discipline all the time. Now, this is my personal theory on how it all happened, because now that he's teaching 200, 300, 400 people that are just yoga teachers, he's going to teach them differently than he's going to teach his mainstream class. You want to be a Bikram yoga teacher? I'm going to kick your ass. You're going to have to do what Jimmy and Paul did. You're going to have to hold the postures the whole time. You're not going to be able to drink water when I tell you to. You're going to have to stand at attention in between, because that's what we chose to do as teachers. There was a book published about 20 years ago called Hell-Bent. I suggest you get it. It was written by a Bikram teacher, not an outsider, which is interesting, Ben Lord. So look it up. And I talk about this, my theory, in his book, because he interviewed me. I had a delay somewhere in some airport, so we had like a 3-hour. He's going to teach his teacher training people, that's all they are, is teacher training people, differently than he's going to teach his mainstream class. In his mainstream class, he might have an 85-year-old man that can't stand on one leg. He might have a woman with one arm. He might have somebody with MS. He might have somebody that needs lots of modifications because they can't find their balance for more than 3 seconds. He was very empathetic to those people and would offer those modifications. The teacher trained people are mostly 25, 30-year-old men and women who are most likely fit. He's going to teach them differently. He's going to teach them in a different, more disciplined manner. Now, here's what happened. Now these teachers graduate and they go to either open their own studio or they go out to become Bikram yoga teachers, and they teach the mainstream class the way Bikram was teaching the teachers. Very tough, very disciplined, very drill sergeant-ish. You can't drink water until I tell you to drink water. You can't leave the room, go in child pose if you're hot. All of these disciplines started to come in because that's how they were taught by Bikram at the teacher training program, but they weren't able to witness Bikram teaching his mainstream students with all their modifications. So now a new breed of Bikram teacher began to develop. And I was the same way. When I opened my studio in 1983, January 20th, 1983, I was also very disciplined. Asked my students that first came to my studio. There was Meryl and Cheryl and Jim. I was a lot tougher back then. But slowly, like Bikram, I became Americanized. And I started to loosen up on the discipline. And as I did so, my student body began to increase, because not everybody wants to choose to be a teacher. Not everyone wants to choose to be in that discipline structured class. The average person in the West wants to come in, they want to get rid of their stress, they want to get rid of their aches and pains, they want to come in that hot room and stretch, do the best yoga that they can. Now the point to this whole video is this. How structured and disciplined should one yoga teacher be? It's really going to be up to them. It's their choice. You can choose to be disciplined, enforcing the discipline about not drinking water when you're supposed to, not leaving the room, not doing a pose that we're not doing because we want to keep the class flowing. There's pros and cons. Or you can be on the lighter side, not care if they drink water whenever they want to. Leave the room if they're overheated and they need to get out of the heat. I believe if you choose the more disciplined side, the more regimented side, you may have less students in your class, but they may improve much faster. I mean, should you really tell somebody they shouldn't be drinking water, especially if they're overheated, especially if they're dehydrated or they can't leave the room? I know sometimes I want people to leave the room because they've been overheated. So as yoga teachers, in my opinion, of teaching this for 43 years, we want to be discerning. We want to make sure that, yes, we're teaching a well-structured class, that people aren't doing whatever they want to. But at the same time, to enforce so much discipline that we're going to be limiting how many students come into the class, we need to find a balance in the middle. Moderation, which a lot of yoga gurus preach. Moderation. As teachers, we have to discern when to enforce the rule and when not to. When to be disciplined, when to be lax. We have to have that discerning field, not just one rule for everybody. So now when they started bringing water bottles into the room and people were drinking water whenever they wanted to, Bikram started, especially in the teacher train program, Bikram started to say, hold on, you don't have the freedom to just do whatever you want. We have to have entrainment. This is a disciplined class. I tell you what, after the eagle pose, we'll have our first designated water break, and that's when you can drink water. But he wasn't going to tell a person who's dehydrated, somebody who's completely overheated, not to drink water if they need to have water in that moment. That's again where the teacher needs to be discerning on when to enforce the discipline. So my intention in making this video is to shed a little light on the history behind party time, the discipline, the structure that yoga teachers take, especially in the Bikram hot yoga world. And as yoga students and as yoga teachers, you can choose how disciplined you want to be, what kind of discipline you want to enforce. Be discerning. So that's our episode for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing, hit the notification bell. Any questions or concerns or comments, put them down below. I think I make a few comments on this video. And I'll see you at the next video. Bye, everyone.